Some of the deepest wounds in life are invisible. They don't bleed, they don't bruise, but they burn inside your heart every single day. And the truth is, most people never really heal, they just learn how to hide their pain. But what if I told you there's a way to actually move on, to reclaim your peace, and to finally be free? Today, you're going to learn how to let it hurt, let it heal, and let it go, because that is the only way you truly move forward. There is a weight that almost every person in this world carries, yet very few admit out loud. It is the kind of weight that you cannot measure on a scale, the kind of heaviness that doesn't sit on your shoulders, but presses against your heart every single day. It is the weight of holding on to things that broke you, people who hurt you, and moments that you wish you could erase. This weight is silent but powerful, and if you've ever felt it, you know that it doesn't just slow you down, it drains you from the inside out. You wake up in the morning already tired, not because of the day ahead, but because of the invisible burden you have been carrying for years. And what's worse is that so many people learn to live with it, convincing themselves that it's normal, that it's just a part of life, when in reality, it is not life, it is survival. The difference between living and surviving is freedom, and freedom is impossible when your soul is tied to pain that you refuse to let go of. Think about how many times you've replayed that same memory in your mind, how many times you've rehearsed that conversation you never got to have, or how many nights you've laid awake wondering why they did what they did, why things happened the way they did, and why you weren't enough. These thoughts don't just come and go. They sit with you, they walk with you, and they begin to shape your identity. You start defining yourself not by who you are becoming, but by what happened to you. And this is the tragedy of holding on. You don't just hold on to memories. You start holding on to pain, to anger, to bitterness, to guilt. And before long, you are not carrying your past anymore. Your past is carrying you. It is driving your decisions, your reactions, your fears, and even your hopes. The weight of holding on is not just emotional. It is spiritual. It is mental. It is physical. Stress breaks down your body. Fear weakens your courage, and anger poisons your relationships. You think you're protecting yourself by holding on, but in reality, you are only protecting the very pain that is destroying you. The problem with holding on is that it feels safe. Pain is familiar. As strange as it sounds, we cling to what hurt us because we are afraid of what life would look like without it. We become so used to the weight that we no longer imagine who we could be without it. A person who has carried chains for years begins to forget what freedom even feels like. They walk differently, they think differently, they expect differently. The chains become a part of their identity. And in the same way, we make peace with our pain by letting it define us. We say things like, "This is just who I am. I've been through too much. People always leave me. I can't trust anyone. I'll never be happy again." These are not truths. These are lies disguised as protection. Holding on convinces us that if we cling to the pain, we won't be surprised if it happens again. But the truth is, holding on only guarantees that it will keep happening, not on the outside, but within you. There is a reason why you feel heavy, why joy feels temporary, and why peace feels impossible. It is because you were not designed to carry the burden of yesterday into the promise of tomorrow. Every day you wake up with the choice to step forward, but if your hands are already full of the past, you have nothing left to reach for the future. Imagine trying to climb a mountain while dragging bags of rocks tied to your back. That is what holding on feels like. Every step becomes harder, every breath becomes shorter, and eventually you are too exhausted to even continue the climb. Many people give up on their dreams not because they lack talent or opportunity, but because they were too weighed down by what they refused to release. The chains of yesterday steal the strength you need for today. And maybe your weight doesn't come from betrayal. Maybe it comes from failure. Maybe you are holding on to mistakes you made, to opportunities you missed, to decisions you regret. The shame of your past failures is often heavier than the pain of someone else's betrayal. You convince yourself that because you messed up once, you are not worthy of trying again. You punish yourself by replaying the moment over and over, wishing you could go back. but time only moves in one direction, and every second spent looking backward is a second stolen from your future. Guilt and shame are weights you were never meant to carry for a lifetime. They were meant to teach you, not imprison you. Yet so many people live as if their past failures are a life sentence. The weight of holding on also shows itself in resentment. Resentment is like carrying fire in your chest, expecting it to burn others, but it only burns you. The person who hurt you may have moved on, but the moment you refuse to release them, you tie yourself to them for the rest of your life. You let them live rent-free in your mind. You give them power over your emotions, and you allow their actions to dictate your future. This is what bitterness does. It keeps you in bondage to someone who isn't even thinking about you anymore. And the saddest part is, you may spend years waiting for an apology that never comes, waiting for closure that never arrives, waiting for justice that never happens. In that waiting, your life slowly slips away, not because of what they did, but because of what you refuse to let go of. This is why the introduction to moving on always begins with confronting the weight you are carrying. You cannot heal from what you refuse to acknowledge. You cannot be free from what you are still holding on to. The first step is honesty, brutal honesty with yourself. What is it that you are clinging to? Who is it that you have not forgiven? What failure are you still defining yourself by? What wound are you still protecting? Until you answer these questions, the weight will remain, and as long as it remains, freedom will only feel like a dream instead of your reality. There is a reason so many people remain stuck in the same cycles of heartbreak, disappointment, and unfulfillment. It isn't because they don't want to move on. It isn't because they don't desire freedom. And it isn't because they don't know that healing is necessary. The reason is far simpler. Most people are afraid to face their pain. They bury it under distractions. They drown it in busyness. They silence it with noise. And they convince themselves that ignoring it is the same as overcoming it. But pain doesn't disappear just because you deny it. Pain doesn't vanish just because you refuse to talk about it. Pain that is ignored doesn't die. It multiplies. It burrows itself deeper into your soul, and it finds new ways to show up in your life. It becomes anger when someone says the wrong thing. It becomes sadness when you're alone. It becomes fear when you're faced with new opportunities. The energy you think you've hidden begins to leak into every area of your life, because what you don't confront will always control you. To truly move forward, you must first allow yourself to feel everything you've been running from. That means admitting to yourself that what happened hurt you. It means acknowledging that the words spoken over you cut deep, that the betrayal shook your trust, that the failure crushed your confidence, that the rejection made you question your worth. For so long, you may have been telling yourself, "I'm fine, I don't care anymore. It is what it is." But deep down, you know those are just shields to protect yourself from the truth. The truth is, it hurt. And until you let it hurt, you will never truly heal. Denial only stretches the wound longer. The longer you avoid the pain, the longer it keeps its grip on you. Letting it hurt doesn't mean drowning in sorrow forever. It doesn't mean living in pity, and it doesn't mean seeing yourself as a victim. Letting it hurt means giving yourself permission to grieve, to break, to feel. There is no shame in admitting that something devastated you. There is no weakness in crying. Tears are not a sign that you've lost. They are a sign that you are human. So many people have been taught to stay strong by numbing themselves. But true strength is not pretending you're unbothered. It's having the courage to sit with the pain and not run from it. Strength is saying, yes, this hurt me deeply, but I will face it instead of hiding from it. When you allow yourself to feel the pain, you also allow yourself to discover what it is teaching you. Pain is never wasted. It always carries lessons. Sometimes the lesson is about boundaries. Sometimes it's about self-worth. Sometimes it's about the truth of who people really are. But you can't learn those lessons if you're too busy suppressing the pain. Imagine cutting your hand and then pretending it isn't bleeding. You might cover it up and keep moving, but under the surface, the wound festers, the infection spreads, and the damage grows worse. Emotional wounds work the same way. Ignored pain becomes toxic. but acknowledged pain becomes the soil where wisdom grows. There is a depth of growth that can only come through pain, but only if you face it with honesty. Think about the people you admire most: their strength, their wisdom, their resilience. None of them became who they are by running from hardship. They became who they are by embracing it, by letting the heartbreaks, failures, and struggles refine them instead of destroy them. When you let it hurt, you give yourself permission to become stronger than the pain. You stop being controlled by it, and you start transforming through it. The truth is, pain is part of the human story. Everyone will experience loss, betrayal, rejection, or failure at some point. You cannot avoid it, no matter how careful you try to live. But what makes the difference between those who grow and those who remain broken is how they handle the pain. If you numb it, you prolong it. If you bury it, you carry it. But if you feel it, you free it. Pain that is felt has a beginning and an end. Pain that is avoided becomes endless. Some people are so afraid to feel their pain because they think if they open the door, it will consume them. They are terrified that if they cry, they won't stop crying. That if they acknowledge the heartbreak, it will break them entirely. But what they don't realize is that the pain is already consuming them in silence. By refusing to face it, they allow it to control every hidden corner of their life. The only way to disarm the pain is to let it surface, to let it pass through you, to let it do the work it came to do. It will not last forever, but you have to give it space to move. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. Yes, it will feel raw. Yes, it will demand vulnerability. But the very act of allowing yourself to hurt is the doorway to healing. Pretending to be unshakable may protect your image, but it will never protect your soul. Your healing requires honesty. Your peace requires acknowledgement. And your freedom requires that you stop hiding from the very thing that needs to be faced. Pain is not the enemy. Pain is a messenger. It comes to reveal where you've been wounded, where you've been stretched, where you've been broken. It comes to highlight what needs to change, what needs to be released, what needs to be rebuilt. When you stop running and you let it hurt, you begin to reclaim power over your own story. You are no longer the prisoner of hidden wounds. You become the author of your healing. And in time, the same pain that once brought you to your knees becomes the reason you rise taller than ever before. One of the greatest illusions people fall into after experiencing pain is the desire for an instant cure. They want to wake up one morning and feel as if nothing ever happened. They want the memories erased, the emotions silenced, and the wounds stitched overnight. This is the fantasy that pain creates, that there must be some shortcut to bypass the discomfort, to speed through the ache, to skip the tears, and arrive at peace. But real healing does not bow to convenience. Real healing is not a straight line or a quick fix. It is a process, and like all processes, it takes time, patience, and endurance. The truth that many resist is that there is no timeline for how long it should take you to heal. The journey is deeply personal, shaped by who you are, what you've endured, and how willing you are to allow yourself to move through it. Healing is not an event you check off like a task. It is a season you grow through, and seasons cannot be rushed. The problem arises because we live in a culture of speed. Everything around us has been designed for immediacy. Fast food, instant results, same-day delivery, quick fixes. We have been conditioned to expect that everything, even our emotions, should bend to speed. So, when heartbreak lingers, when grief doesn't fade quickly, when trust doesn't rebuild in a week, people assume something is wrong with them. They think, I should be over this by now. Why am I still feeling this way? Why can't I just move on? But nothing is wrong with them. What's wrong is the expectation that healing is supposed to be instant. Wounds of the heart, unlike wounds of the body, cannot be stitched with a simple treatment. They require a process of internal rebuilding, of emotional restoration, of spiritual renewal. The wound may close on the surface quickly, but underneath, the real work is still happening. Think about a physical injury, like a broken bone. Even after the cast is removed, the bone is not instantly strong. It takes time for the body to rebuild density, for strength to return, for mobility to be restored. If you rush the process, if you try to run before the bone has fully healed, you risk greater damage, sometimes worse than the original injury. Emotional healing is no different. if you rush it, if you force yourself to smile when you are still breaking, if you pretend you are fine when you are still bleeding inside, you only reopen the wound in ways that make recovery harder. This is why patience is so important. Time is not the enemy of healing. Time is the soil that allows the roots of restoration to grow. Healing also requires acceptance that it will not look the same for everyone. Some people recover from heartbreak faster than others. Some grieve for years, while others find peace in months. Some find closure through conversations, while others never receive an apology but still choose to release the pain. There is no universal path. What works for someone else may not work for you, and that is okay. Healing is not about comparison, it is about commitment. As long as you are committed to the process, no matter how long it takes, you are still moving forward. The danger comes when you measure your progress against others, when you believe you should be at a different stage simply because someone else appears to have moved on quicker. Healing cannot be measured by anyone else's timeline, but your own. Part of why healing takes time is because it forces you to confront layers of yourself you may not even know existed. Pain doesn't just touch the surface of your life, it reaches deep into your identity, your beliefs, your patterns, your expectations. Healing requires you to peel back those layers one by one, to ask hard questions, to sit with uncomfortable truths. Why did that situation hurt so much? What did it reveal about the way I see myself? What fears did it expose? What insecurities did it trigger? These are not questions that can be answered in a single day. They require reflection, honesty, and the courage to sit in silence with your own soul. And sometimes the answers don't come immediately. Sometimes you discover them months or years later, when you look back and finally see the purpose behind the pain. Another reason healing takes time is because emotions do not operate on logic. You can understand something logically and still not feel better. You can know the relationship is toxic. You can know the opportunity is gone. You can know the betrayal wasn't your fault. And yet, your heart still aches. That is because emotions move slower than thoughts. Your mind may grasp the truth quickly, but your heart needs time to catch up. Too often, people try to force themselves to feel differently simply because they know better. But that is not how healing works. You must give your emotions the same patience you give your mind. You must allow your heart to process in its own time, without judgment, without shame, without pressure to speed up. The process of healing is often 2 steps forward and 1 step back. You may feel strong one day and broken the next. You may feel like you've moved on, only to be triggered by a memory, a place, or a song. This does not mean you are failing. It means you are human. Healing is not a straight path. It is a winding road filled with ups and downs. What matters is not that you never stumble, but that you continue to move forward no matter how many times you fall. Every time you get back up, you are healing. Every time you choose to face the pain instead of bury it, you are healing. Every time you decide to give yourself grace instead of judgment, you are healing. The process is slow, but it is sacred. It is in the slow unfolding of healing that transformation happens. It is in the quiet nights of tears, in the long conversations with yourself, in the prayers whispered in the dark, in the small victories that nobody sees. Healing is not glamorous, it is not instant, it is not simple, but it is real. And the more you embrace the truth that it cannot be rushed, the more freedom you will find in allowing yourself to move through it at the pace your soul requires. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the journey of healing. Many people resist it because they believe forgiveness is the same as excusing what someone did, or that it is giving a free pass to the person who hurt them. Others avoid it because they think it means they have to reconcile, trust again, or open themselves back up to the same people who caused their wounds. But forgiveness is not about the other person. It is about you. It is not about rewriting what happened. It is about releasing the grip that the pain has over your life. It is not about saying that the hurt didn't matter. It is about choosing not to let that hurt define every chapter of your future. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to them. It is the freedom you give to yourself. When you hold on to resentment, you are the one carrying the weight. The person who betrayed you may not think about it anymore. The person who left you may have moved on. The person who hurt you may even forget what they did. Yet you remain bound, rehearsing the moment over and over, carrying the bitterness in your chest as though keeping it alive will somehow balance the scales of justice. But resentment does not punish the offender. It punishes you. It steals your peace. It clouds your joy. It fills your mind with anger, and it poisons your heart with negativity. Every time you replay the moment, every time you nurture the anger, every time you allow yourself to dwell on what they did, you are handing over your power to the very person who took it from you in the first place. Forgiveness, then, becomes your weapon. It is the way you reclaim control of your own emotions, your own peace, your own destiny. Forgiveness does not mean you have to forget. Forgetting is not always possible, and it is not even the goal. Forgiveness means you remember without reliving. It means the memory no longer holds power over your mood, your reactions, your choices. You may still remember the betrayal, but you no longer let it shape how you trust. You may still remember the rejection, but you no longer allow it to define your worth. You may still remember the pain, but you have chosen to rise above it instead of staying stuck beneath it. This is the power of forgiveness. It does not erase the past, but it transforms your relationship with it. Forgiveness is also not the same as reconciliation. You can forgive someone without ever speaking to them again. You can forgive without restoring the relationship. Reconciliation requires both people to show up, but forgiveness requires only you. It is your choice, your decision, your healing. Sometimes the most powerful act of forgiveness is walking away completely and never looking back. Forgiveness does not mean letting people back into your life who are committed to breaking you. It means releasing the bitterness they left behind, so you don't allow them to keep breaking you long after they're gone. The reason forgiveness is so difficult is because it feels unfair. It feels like letting someone off too easily. You may think, if I forgive, it means they got away with it. It means what they did doesn't matter. But forgiveness has nothing to do with fairness. Life is not always fair. People often do not apologize. Justice does not always show up. Waiting for those things before you forgive is like waiting for a wound to heal while still pouring salt on it every day. Forgiveness is not about making things fair. It is about making yourself free. It is saying, what you did hurt me, but it will not own me. I choose peace over bitterness. I choose freedom over bondage. Forgiveness is an act of strength, not weakness. Anyone can hold a grudge. Anyone can stay angry. Anyone can cling to bitterness for years. But it takes true strength to release it, to rise above it, to choose love where hatred would be easier. Forgiveness is courage because it requires you to let go of something that feels like protection. Anger feels like armor, but it is really a cage. Bitterness feels like power, but it is really poison. Forgiveness requires vulnerability. It asks you to trust that your healing does not depend on what someone else does, but on what you decide. Forgiveness also has layers. Sometimes you forgive once, but the pain resurfaces, and you have to forgive again. This does not mean you failed. It means the wound is deeper than you realized. Healing is a process, and forgiveness often unfolds over time. It is not a one-time act, but a continual choice to release bitterness whenever it tries to return. Some days the anger may feel stronger. Some days the grief may feel overwhelming. But every time you choose forgiveness, you loosen the chain a little more. Over time, those chains break completely, and you realize that what once consumed you no longer controls you. And forgiveness is not only for others. Many times, the hardest person to forgive is yourself. You hold on to guilt for the mistakes you made, the chances you wasted, the words you said, or the people you hurt. You punish yourself long after everyone else has moved on. But just as you deserve to release others, you deserve to release yourself. Self-forgiveness is not ignoring your flaws. It is acknowledging them without being defined by them. It is choosing to learn instead of linger, to grow instead of grieve endlessly. You are human, and being human means making mistakes. But punishing yourself forever is not justice. It is self-destruction. The same grace you extend to others, you must also extend inward. Forgiveness is a journey that requires humility, honesty, and a willingness to let go of what no longer serves you. It does not mean you condone the wrong. It does not mean you open yourself up to harm again. It does not mean you forget what happened. It simply means you refuse to let your heart remain chained to anger, bitterness, or guilt. Forgiveness is the bridge that takes you from pain to peace, from bondage to freedom, from the past into the future you deserve. Letting go is one of the most difficult lessons life demands from us, because it requires us to release the very things we thought we could never live without. It asks us to loosen our grip on people we loved deeply, on dreams we once built our lives around, on expectations we thought were certain, and on pain that has become so familiar that it almost feels like home. The art of letting go is not about pretending those things never mattered. It is about accepting that they are no longer meant to travel with you into the next chapter of your life. Holding on often feels safer, because familiarity, even when it hurts, can feel more comfortable than the unknown. But clinging to what no longer serves you only ensures that you remain stuck in a cycle of pain, unable to move forward into the fullness of who you are meant to become. Letting go is not a betrayal of your love, your effort, or your past. It is an act of faith that what is ahead of you is greater than what is behind you. So many people live their lives trapped in the grip of the past, revisiting old memories, replaying conversations, reanalyzing mistakes, and reliving heartbreak. They convince themselves that if they think about it enough, they will finally understand it, or if they hold on long enough, somehow it will change. But the truth is, no amount of dwelling can rewrite the story. The past is unchangeable. What happened has already been written, and clinging to it only reopens wounds that were meant to close. The more you hold on, the more you bleed. Letting go is the choice to stop reopening the wound and to allow healing to finally take its course. It is refusing to live in yesterday while sacrificing today. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you erase memories or pretend the love, the effort, or the experience wasn't real. It means you no longer let those things dictate your future. It means you acknowledge what it was. You honor what it taught you, but you choose not to let it control your joy, your peace, or your destiny anymore. You stop asking, what if? And you start saying, even if. Even if they never apologize, I will move forward. Even if I never get back what I lost, I will find joy again. Even if the dream didn't work out, I will believe in new possibilities. This shift is the very essence of letting go, releasing your grip on what could have been so you can embrace what still can be. Sometimes what makes letting go so difficult is that our identity becomes entangled with what we're holding on to. We define ourselves by the relationship, by the success, by the dream, by the role we played. And when those things end, we feel as though we've lost ourselves. But letting go is the invitation to rediscover who you are outside of what you lost. It is the chance to remember that you are not only someone's partner, not only someone's employee, not only someone's dreamer. You are a whole person, worthy and complete, even without what slipped away. Holding on to something that has already ended is like trying to wear clothes you've outgrown. They no longer fit, no matter how tightly you cling to them. Letting go is acknowledging that your growth demands space that the past cannot provide. Another layer of letting go is releasing the need for closure. So many people delay their healing because they are waiting for answers, waiting for explanations, waiting for apologies that may never come. They believe that if they could just understand why it happened, or if the person who hurt them would just admit what they did, then they could finally move on. But closure does not come from other people. It comes from within. You don't need them to say sorry for you to forgive. You don't need them to explain for you to accept. You don't need them to validate your worth for you to know you are valuable. Waiting for closure is giving away your power, and letting go is the decision to take it back. It is choosing to close the chapter yourself, even if no one else gives you the ending you hoped for. Letting go also requires trust. Trust that what is meant for you will not pass you by, and trust that what left you was never meant to stay. Life has a way of removing things, people, and situations that no longer align with your purpose. It may hurt in the moment, it may feel like loss, but often it is protection disguised as pain. The relationship that ended may have been keeping you from discovering yourself. The opportunity that slipped away may have been redirecting you to something greater. The dream that collapsed may have been preparing you for one bigger than you imagined. Letting go is not just about loss. It is about trust. Trust that life, God, or the universe knows what you need, even when you cannot yet see it. The art of letting go is also about perspective. Instead of seeing it as the end, you begin to see it as a transition. Every ending creates space for a new beginning. Just as a tree must shed its leaves in autumn to prepare for new growth in spring, you too must release what no longer serves you so that you can grow into who you are becoming. Holding on to the old prevents you from experiencing the new. The beauty of letting go is that it opens your hands, and only with open hands can you receive what is waiting for you. At its core, letting go is about freedom. Freedom from the chains of the past. Freedom from the weight of what you cannot control. Freedom from the cycle of endless what-ifs. It is the bold declaration that your peace matters more than your pain, that your future matters more than your past, that your growth matters more than your grip. It is not easy. It is a daily choice, sometimes a moment-to-moment battle. But each time you release a little more, you gain back a piece of yourself. And slowly, day by day, you realize that the art of letting go was never about losing. It was about making space to finally live. There comes a point in every person's journey where they must make a decision. Will this pain break me, or will I use it to build me? Pain is inevitable, but what is optional is what you decide to do with it. Some people allow their pain to keep them small, to silence them, to convince them that life will never be good again. Others take that same pain and transform it into fuel, into energy, into drive that pushes them toward greatness. The difference is not in the size of the pain, but in the perspective of the person carrying it. When you understand that pain carries energy, you begin to realize that you can redirect it. Pain can either chain you down or propel you forward. It can either be the reason you give up or the reason you refuse to quit. And the most extraordinary people you admire are not those who lived painless lives, but those who turn their pain into their power. Turning pain into power begins with a shift in mindset. Most people see pain only as something destructive, as something meant to weaken them, as something that should never have happened. But pain is not always an enemy. It is a mirror. It shows you what matters most to you. It reveals what you've been ignoring. It uncovers the strength you didn't know you had. If you view pain only as punishment, you miss the opportunity it carries. But if you view pain as raw energy, you begin to see that it can be channeled. That heartbreak that shattered you can be the reason you learn self-worth. That betrayal that broke your trust can be the reason you develop wisdom. That failure that humiliated you can be the reason you sharpen your discipline. Pain is information, and once you understand the message behind it, you unlock the power hidden within it. One of the most profound truths about pain is that it stretches you. Think about physical training. Athletes grow stronger, not because they avoid resistance, but because they push through it. The muscle tears in the process, and that very tearing is what allows it to grow back stronger. Emotional and spiritual growth works the same way. Pain stretches you beyond your comfort zone. It pushes you to develop resilience. It forces you to dig deeper into your character. No one becomes strong in a life of ease. Ease creates comfort, but pain creates depth. The very moments that hurt you most are often the same ones that prepare you for the greatest chapters of your life. But turning pain into power also requires responsibility. You must refuse to let pain turn you bitter. Bitterness is when pain owns you, when you allow it to harden your heart, when you let it poison how you see people and how you see yourself. Power, on the other hand, is when you own the pain. You take what was meant to destroy you and you use it as the foundation for your rise. That means instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking, "What can this teach me? What can I build with this? How can this fuel my purpose?" When you shift the question, you shift the outcome. Pain is not meant to be the end of your story. It is meant to be the catalyst for a new one. Turning pain into power also means allowing it to give you empathy. When you've suffered, when you've felt broken, when you've cried in the dark, you begin to understand others on a deeper level. Your pain equips you to connect, to encourage, to inspire. Some of the most powerful leaders, teachers, and healers in the world are not those who had perfect lives. They are those who carried heavy wounds and chose to use their scars as a source of light for others. Your pain gives you credibility. It gives you compassion. It gives you the ability to speak to people not from a place of theory, but from a place of truth. The very wound you once hid can become the very story that sets someone else free. Another dimension of turning pain into power is the discipline it can create. Pain often teaches you the cost of neglect, the consequence of misplaced trust, the result of wrong choices. And when you learn from it, you begin to build discipline that shapes your future differently. A failed relationship can teach you the discipline of self-love and boundaries. A failed business can teach you the discipline of preparation and persistence. A betrayal can teach you the discipline of discernment. These disciplines, once forged in pain, become the structures that protect your future success. Without the lessons of pain, you would not have the wisdom to handle the blessings ahead. There is also a fire that pain ignites when you refuse to let it consume you. That fire is called determination. Many people who achieve extraordinary things are not driven only by dreams. They are driven by pain. They remember the nights of being overlooked, the sting of rejection, the weight of being underestimated, and they decide never to feel that powerless again. They take the energy of that pain and turn it into work ethic, into persistence, into vision. Pain gives them the hunger to keep going when others quit, the resilience to rise after every fall, the courage to face risks others are too afraid to take. Pain becomes their secret weapon, the silent fuel that keeps them moving when the world thinks they should have stopped long ago. Most importantly, turning pain into power is not about denying what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It is about choosing to rise anyway. It is about deciding that your story will not end in bitterness, but in breakthrough. It is about refusing to let the people, circumstances, or failures that hurt you have the final say. Your scars do not mean you are weak. They mean you survived. And survival is the foundation of strength. Every time you look at what once broke you and realize you are still here, you are already living proof that pain can be transformed into power. Pain will either paralyze you or propel you. The choice is yours. And when you choose to let it propel you, you discover that the very thing you once prayed to escape becomes the very thing that prepares you for your destiny. The art of turning pain into power is the art of refusing to be a victim and choosing instead to be a victor. It is taking control of your narrative and using every ounce of your hurt as the fuel to build a life so strong, so unshakable, that nothing can break you again. There is a sacred moment in every human journey when you finally feel the weight start to lift. It is not because life suddenly became perfect or because every scar has disappeared, but because you made the choice to release what no longer belongs in your hands. That choice is the birth of a new chapter. Walking into freedom is not about erasing the past, but about refusing to be chained to it any longer. For so long you may have carried the voices of regret, the echoes of betrayal, the sting of disappointment, and the fear of repeating the same mistakes. And those burdens have shaped how you moved, how you trusted, how you dreamed. But there comes a day when you look at all of it and decide that your story does not end where the pain began. That decision is not always loud. Sometimes it is a quiet whisper inside you that says, I deserve more than this weight. I deserve more than this cycle. I deserve to live free. Walking into freedom means understanding that healing was never just about recovery. It was always about transformation. You are no longer the same person who first carried those wounds, because pain does not leave you unchanged. It chisels you, it sharpens you, it alters the way you see the world and the way you see yourself. But when you walk into freedom, you take those changes and use them not as barriers, but as bridges. You use your experiences as stepping stones, not stumbling blocks. Instead of defining yourself by what happened, you define yourself by how you rose from it. And in that shift, you reclaim the authorship of your story. No longer does your past get to narrate the next chapter. You hold the pen now. Freedom also comes with the release of control over what cannot be changed. So many people stay stuck because they keep trying to rewrite history in their minds, wishing the betrayal never happened, wishing the love never left, wishing the opportunity never slipped away. But no amount of wishing can rewrite what is already written. Freedom begins when you accept the unchangeable and stop bargaining with what is already gone. It is when you stop saying, "Why me?" and start saying, "What now?" that you create space for possibility. You are no longer trapped in yesterday's shadows because you have turned to face the light of today. In this new chapter, walking into freedom also means embracing vulnerability again. Pain often makes us build walls, thick barriers meant to protect us from being hurt again. And while those walls may keep danger out, they also keep love, joy, and growth from coming in. Freedom is not found in hiding, but in learning to live with courage again. It is saying, I know what hurt feels like, but I also know that hurt is not the end of my story. It is daring to open your heart again, to trust again, to dream again, even with the memory of the past still etched inside you. Because true freedom is not the absence of risk, it is the strength to live fully despite the risks. When you walk into freedom, you also discover peace. Not the temporary peace that comes from distraction, denial, or escape, but the deep peace that comes from alignment with your own soul. This peace is not fragile. It does not crumble when life throws challenges your way. It is steady because it is built on acceptance, forgiveness, and release. You know you have entered a new chapter when you can think of what once tore you apart and feel calm instead of chaos, gratitude instead of resentment, wisdom instead of bitterness. That shift is the mark of true freedom, when the past no longer has the power to disturb your present. Another element of walking into freedom is vision. Pain narrows your focus. It traps you in cycles of replaying what went wrong. But once you let go, your eyes open again. You begin to see possibility, to dream bigger, to imagine a life that is not defined by what you lost, but by what you can create. Freedom expands your horizon. It reminds you that life is not over, that love is not over, that success is not over, that joy is not over. You realize that your story still has pages unwritten, chapters unexplored, and victories waiting to be lived. Freedom ignites hope, and hope is the seed from which every great future grows. Walking into freedom also teaches you authenticity. For so long, pain can force you to wear masks, to pretend you're fine when you're not, to play strong when you're breaking, to act unbothered when you're deeply wounded. But in freedom, you shed the mask. You no longer need to perform or prove. You live in truth, and that truth becomes your strength. You are not ashamed of your scars because they tell a story of survival, of resilience, of courage. You no longer hide your wounds. You show them as evidence that healing is possible. Authenticity frees you from the prison of pretending and allows you to walk boldly in who you truly are. And perhaps the most powerful part of walking into freedom is realizing that you are not walking alone. Your story, your pain, your healing, and your transformation are not just for you. They are for others who are still trapped in their own cycles of hurt. When you walk free, you become a guide. You become a light. You become living proof that freedom is possible, that the past does not have to define the future, that pain can be overcome. You inspire without even trying, simply by living in your truth. And as you step into this new chapter, you carry not just your own hope, but the ability to awaken hope in others. Freedom is not a single moment. It is a lifestyle, a commitment to no longer let yesterday chain you, a determination to keep choosing peace, joy, and growth every day. Walking into freedom means you are no longer a prisoner of the wounds that once defined you. It means you stand tall, not because the journey was easy, but because you decided to rise anyway. It means that every step you take is no longer weighed down by regret, fear, or bitterness, but lifted by purpose, resilience, and courage. This is the gift of a new chapter. This is the power of walking into freedom.